Hey, it's Cava Faulkner with Cava Faulkner, Elk Grove Living Trust lawyer, Sacramento estate planning attorney. Thanks so much for tuning into another edition of Christine's Family Wealth Secrets. So today we're talking about Aretha Franklin's death 3 years later and the mess that is unfolding, that has been unfolding for the past 3 years. And so if you want to know, how do you make sure that you have a plan that is going to work, that you can keep your family out of court, you can keep your family, of course, in your thoughts and your plan without making a mess of it all, this is definitely a video that you want to watch. So we have an article that's attached to our video, and so we're going to put the link below. So you definitely should check that out because there's a lot more detail about what's going on. But I want to say that it's always so interesting, number one, to look at what happens with celebrities because, we all think that they have so much money, they have to have it all together. And in fact, many times they're so busy living large, living their lives that they don't get around to doing the more basic legal planning that's so important to protect all of those millions that they've amassed throughout their lifetime. And so in this particular instance, we're talking about Aretha Franklin, who passed away in 2018. And she did have children, and originally, it was thought that she didn't have any kind of planning at all. And so do you remember what it was like being in school, whether it was high school, college, graduate school, where you had different versions of the same document and you would have to label them like first draft, second draft, third draft, fourth draft. Imagine what that would be like if those documents were not labeled. Imagine how difficult it would be for you to remember, okay, which was the final version of this? So that's apparently what's happened over the years that have gone by since Aretha Franklin died. 3 years, originally they thought there was no estate plan at all. They thought there was no will. And so her niece was appointed as the executor. And in this process, as time has passed, a number of different wills have been unearthed. And some of them handwritten, a typewritten will. And so, this is all kind of coming down in a completely different state in Michigan. So I can't speak to the laws in Michigan. But usually the way it works is the last will is going to be the one that's deemed to be the most recent reflection of the testator, right, the writer's intent. But there's so many problems with all of these different wills. So the last will was actually like a draft. It wasn't signed, but Aretha had actually gone to work with a lawyer. And so the question, of course, is, is that actually a valid will? Who knows what the formalities are in Michigan when it comes to a will, but I'm guessing that probably Aretha needed to sign the will and date it. Those are usually really basic formalities. They usually need to be witnessed by one or two witnesses or sometimes more. But this is not even a signed copy, but it leads you to think that maybe there is a signed copy of this exact document out there. So there's this problem of, there's this will draft that's not signed, but she actually took the time to go to a lawyer. And now the family is going to have to dig to find out, was there actually a signed will someplace? Nobody's been able to find it so far. I imagine they're probably contacting the law firm if they're even still in business. It's always interesting when lawyers retire to see if they know anything about whether she actually ever executed the document. But so if it's not valid, then there are several prior handwritten wills that are very, very difficult to read. And so then it's left up to a matter of interpretation, what can be gleaned from these different wills. And what was the intention? Because there's information that's crossed out. So the moral of the story is, if you want a clear plan, so important not to have duplicative or inconsistent documentation. Ideally, what you want to see in estate planning is one really clear document. And even if there were prior versions of it before, you want those to have been destroyed. So there's nothing else that somebody could find and say, well, wait a minute, there's this earlier document. And what sometimes happens is a judge is going to look through each individual document, and they may determine that one that was executed earlier is actually executed with all of the correct formalities that are required for a valid will. And so it may very well be a will that, in this case, Aretha didn't think was valid any longer, is actually the one that carries the day. And so the moral of the story is, make sure you don't have duplicate, inconsistent documentation. If you have a will and you're going to create a new one, especially if you're doing it yourself, make sure that you get rid of the old one. Because usually a will say, I revoke all prior wills. But it's pretty useful to have no kind of evidence, let's say, other evidence of any inconsistencies with prior documents. And so when I work with clients who are maybe revising their planning or completely updating them, we talk about the necessary documents that they need to hang on to, but that basically they should destroy the other documents, because you don't want old documents that are no longer valid mixed in with valid documents. It just muddies the waters. And so, unfortunately, as you can imagine, being in court for 3 years, originally thinking, oh, there is no will, and now 3 years later to, oh my gosh, there's 4 different wills, one of which was found stuffed in the back of a couch. It's changed the outcome substantially. The other thing, and if you read the article, you'll see way more detail about this, a lot of information about her private life has come out in court and in the media now because she did not have a plan that kept everything private. And for those people who value their privacy, this is huge. When you have no plan in place, or when you just have a will, you really lose all control of the information that comes out in public in court after the fact. And while you may be gone, that public information could actually have a really, really negative impact on your family, the people who are left behind. And in this particular situation, it does have to do with the father of her children and the kind of relationship that they had. So important to be mindful of not only these kinds of things, right? How your past might be, like your dirty laundry, as it were, might be hung out to dry in the court process. How your wishes may not actually be honored because there's conflicting information, and maybe some of the documents, there's too many documents that say too many different things, and they may not be valid. So, court is always looking to, what is the word? The court is always looking to implement the intent, and they're always trying to go back to determine exactly what was the testator's intent. And so having multiple documents can really make that very difficult. Something else is that all of this time, her family hasn't gotten a dime. And so, not only was the niece named as the executor, she has literally washed her hands of the whole business after all of this. It's become too complicated, too emotional. And so she basically resigned as the executor. But in the meantime, her kids are going from, one document to the next, and they changed the distribution pattern to unequal distributions between her children, to never really knowing what to expect. And on top of that, of course, having everything been tied up in court for so long, and having received none of the $80 million that she had acquired during her lifetime, and millions lost in that process, the probate process as well. So we can definitely learn from the mistakes that these celebrities make in not creating a plan or doing it very haphazardly, approaching it without probably I want to say solemnity is probably a good word, that it really requires to be clear-headed and not just slap some information down on a lined paper, but really considering deeply the impact of your decisions and the import of this kind of planning on your family, and maybe working with a professional who can help you get everything lined up perfectly so that there is no lack of clarity, that your plan is very clear, your intention is very clear, and your family will never end up in court fighting or wondering just exactly what was on your mind when you created this plan. So check out the article. It's very, very interesting and a food for thought for sure. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Christine's Family Wealth Secrets. Subscribe to our channel, like our content, like our videos, and let us know what you'd like to hear about, and I'll produce a video about that just for you. Take care.